Jeremy's here.
Melissa here.
Roger here.
Monica here.
Eddie here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go ahead and review the I-35 mission statement and district priorities. Our mission statement reads, the North State 35 Community School District exists to develop lifelong learners and responsible, productive, successful citizens in an ever-changing society. Our district priorities: number 1, articulate and support a cohesive, student-centered pre-K through 12 vision for continuous school improvement. Number 2, engage in effective teaching and relevant learning for the 21st century. And number 3, operate with fiscal integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness. Everybody should have received the agenda prior to the meeting. I would open up for a discussion and entertain a motion to approve if anybody's so inclined.
I'd move to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I'll second Roger's motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Ted, did we have anybody sign up for the open forum? Okay. I'll go ahead and read the statement as I always do. Residents, students, parents, guardians, and staff members of the district may address the board about relevant topics. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers' participation is limited to 5 minutes per meeting. We ask speakers to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees or students or their performance. Thank you. All right, we'll start with administrative reports. Mr. Bonte is first on the list.
So these, excuse me. So these are all now written reports. So you should have Mr. Bonte's and Mr. Weber's in the folder. And I don't specifically remember the conversation, but I think the intent is if you have questions, then the administrators are here if you would like more detail. And we just want some feedback about what you think of the structure of the reports, if you would like different information or if you would like a different format. So Mrs. Woods and Mrs. Whitson, or Miss Whitson, theirs are actually a hard copy. Most of the time they'll all be electronic, but just so you can kind of see what it looks like in paper form, but you can also see what it looks like. They're all in the same format. So that just kind of an update on that from the workshop that we talked about and trying to work through that.
So I really kept mine to two goal areas, culture and academic, because those are the two things that we really want to focus on. This year, culture, we continue working on our Pride initiative. Really, right now, that means supporting those students that aren't quite meeting those expectations, having those conversations, and going through that learning opportunity with them, and making sure that we come out of it in a better place than where we went in. With that, we finalized our building-wide expectations, our restroom expectations, and our hallway expectations, and those have been sent out to the printer through the AEA, and they'll be making those into posters so we can put them around the secondary in 512, and then once we start to get those a little bit more out in the public with our kids, then we're going to start doing a little bit more of those instructional times during the advisory setting. With that, our second goal that I put on here was talking about academic and core instruction. Talking with Mrs. Whitson, we both agree that one of the areas that we really need to improve on is engagement within the classroom. So what we've done is we've made a common walkthrough form that we've shared at BLT, as well as have started doing some of those initial walkthroughs to get a sense of where the engagement are. We're hoping to include some other people in these instructional rounds so we can get a more holistic picture of kind of where we're at. But then what we'll be using after we get a baseline is we'll be using that data to help us implement strategies within the secondary level to help our students stay more engaged throughout the lesson. One of our goal areas, and again, we haven't finalized every single goal area that we have yet. We've been meeting as a BLT. The first BLT meeting, sadly, I got bit by the COVID bug, so I was out for that one. So we kind of finalized some of those things last week. But our first goal is going to be that 80% of our students are engaged in the lesson by the end of the year. And I think that that's something that's attainable. We're not done going through all of our initial baseline reports, but we definitely think that's something that's attainable. Our second goal really, and we haven't finalized this, we're just starting those initial conversations, but we're thinking about using some fast data to help us kind of tie that to a literacy or a math goal. And so we have people bringing that data to our next building leadership team meeting next week. And then just getting out about interacting with the kids. They came and tried to TP last night. That didn't go well. They TP'd the wrong house, so that was fun. So it's been fun.
I got a quick question on the engagement within the classroom setting. So how do you measure that? Is it objective, subjective?
So we try to make it as objective as possible, right? And so the way we do it is initially, in the initial stages, your team that is doing those walkthroughs has to be on the same page, right? So we'll go into the same room, do the same thing. So we have a form that we have created, and the first thing you do is you draw the classroom. So you are the people in the classroom. Each person is a box, and so what you do is you watch that person for 15, 20 seconds until you get a good sense of what they're doing in that class. Are they actively engaged in what the teacher's doing? If the teacher's instructing, are they watching? Are they taking notes? Or are they off on their phone? And so if they're engaged, you put a plus. If they're not engaged, you put a minus. I like to do 4 or 5 rounds to get a good sense of where they're at. I like to do the rounds both within the teach section as well as in the do section, so you get a better sense of that. And then at the end, you add them all up and you divide by the number you had, and you get a sense of where they're at for engagement. It's a pretty easy task, but the hard part is getting the team to make sure we're all on the same page, because we all need to be plus or minus about 5% when we walk out of that classroom, or that data isn't quite as valid. And so working to do that initially is the part that, when we're in classrooms and we're doing this, we're trying to get our data to be consistent so that when we go for that baseline, we have a more reliable number to use.
Thank you. That was a good explanation.
Electrical stimulation under the seats, maybe? No,
That's their cell phone. We're trying to get rid of those.
That's, yeah. I guess when we're trying to employee engagement and trying to, increase it, obviously, we always go back to the why. Why am I here, right? And that's so important, at least in the corporate setting, right? My job might just be this little thing. I just might only see this slice, but it's a part of the bigger piece.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to share that, because that's always so important, because they may not know why algebra is important until you're an architect at Ryan or something like that.
Yep.
So.
And then the 3 questions I ask before we leave, I ask 3 students, and you ask them, what are you learning today? Why you're learning it, and when are you going to use that information? And so then you get a sense of the why of what we're doing in that class. And that's really the second part of this whole thing, is once we get that engagement to where we need, then we can really focus on the standards and objectives and really dig deeper into the level of the depth of knowledge questions that we're doing within the classroom. But first we got to get the engagement to where it needs to be.
And then just feedback on the report, I really like how all 3 are laid out, or all 4 are all laid out in the same sense, and then we get reminded of the goals. I know yours are not on there for obvious reasons, but it just, right there, it hits you right in the face. What are we trying to accomplish in middle school? Right there, so, thank you. I think they're great.
Anybody else?
All right, I had one. With the holding kids accountable, what kind of, and I say this just with the assumption that you're really holding them accountable. It's not just you're holding everybody accountable. What kind of reception are you getting from the kids with that? I mean, I can assume what that might be, but you could probably read it better than me.
Here's the thing. Through those conversations, if by the time the kid walks out, they're still mad about the situation, you didn't do your job in terms of teaching them what it's all about. It's about the conversations that are associated with the behavior. And so, if a student's, let's say, we'll use academic dishonesty, for instance. So if a student turns in something or a piece of work that's not theirs, having them do an activity that talks about what the repercussions of academic dishonesty makes a lot more sense than just say you have a 30-minute detention, here you go. Because sometimes kids don't know if when they go to the next level, those things one time could mean the difference of, hey, you actually get a grade this semester, or you pay for that whole class and you don't get a grade at all. And so having those opportunities to have those conversations and have them have that self-realization is really important. I think sometimes the reception at home, when students haven't ever been in trouble or ever had those redirections, I think some of that reception isn't there yet because they haven't had those conversations. But our job is to hold students accountable and hold every student accountable, just not the ones that we pick and choose to be accountable to.
So when you do the redirections and holding accountable, do you consistently tie it back to pride?
100%.
Correct.
Every activity goes back to pride. If they get sent to the office for something initially, they fill out a pride sheet that ties their behavior right back to pride. They have 3 questions that I have associated with each one. So let's say they weren't being positive or respectful, they might have to write for positive respect. If there was a bunch of them, they have to write for each one. And it was, what were you doing that didn't meet this expectation? What are you going to do differently next time? And how could this impact you? And so trying to keep that consistent, I have those written right on my board, so when kids come in, they can do that. And then when you look at the specific activities that go along with it, I usually have a question there that ties it right back to the goal that they're missing.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a time when you, I mean, outside of the student maybe doing something incorrectly or out of character or making a bad decision, when would you get the parents involved?
Anytime that you have a conversation about a student's specific behavior. So if a student got in trouble for, we'll just use academic dishonesty, I mean, we need to make sure that we're calling home, that day to have that conversation so that we can move through that process. Now, if I call in a student because, let's say another student got bumped in the hallway and that student might have seen that happen, I might not call home on that because I don't have time in the day to call the 8 students that might have been around to ask, hey, did you see this happen? No, you didn't? Okay, go back to class. The phone call after that would be very time consuming. But if I call you, if a student comes to my office for a reason that they're going to have some type of activity to work on that's not just a quick redirect, something that's going to have to go in the system, a phone call will be made home. And oftentimes I will reach back if it came from the teacher. I also reach out to the teacher and make sure that they're contacting home as well, because that's the other part of that puzzle. All the conversation can't come from the office because typically initially the issue didn't start in the office, if you know what I mean.
Well, and they're part of the solution too.
Correct.
So,
It's
yeah,
all
having
about
them
raising
involved.
kids, right?
Yep.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Bonte? I'd like to echo Eddie's statement. I do like the format and what's included has been, it's concise, but it's well written, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, if you need more, I mean, I can fill more, but that's really what we've been working on, and most of my days are working with students right now. So,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
I guess the only other thing is, since it's so consistent, do we share these out? Or is it just for board? And maybe
Yeah.
I don't want to even get into that.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of this, it's for the board, so that we have
Yeah.
continuity of the conversation, I think.
Yep.
But obviously, all the board packets are electronic, so everybody can see them. But I know each of the administrators sends out a weekly update to all the staff, and I know, and Mrs. Woods can talk about this, she does with parents as well. So I think that, I think most of the information in here is in there at some point, but I wouldn't say it's exactly the same.
Yep.
I think for our purposes, we've got 2 huge goals that we're working on, and what's our progress continual towards that in the different levels. And this is just kind of an ongoing conversation about that, so you guys are up to speed.
Great. I was just hoping to leverage this for more than just board meetings. So if it's leverage for a superintendent,
a little bit to like my audience, like I'll take that into account. So what I wrote on that piece of paper is more, factual based, explicit, trying to get to the point of what we're doing. Whereas when I was, speak to a parent about it, there may be some elaboration or examples or like
Yep.
just a little more depth and maybe a different kind of tone to help with that. So I would say it could definitely be a bridge. And one thing I did do, and I saw someone using it right away, I linked it on my staff weekly update, because that, they know those things. So I linked it there and I saw some of them like checking it out today. So
Good.
that was like, oh, okay, they do look at that. So I did share it in that platform, but I think with parents, I'd probably be a little more, maybe not word it the same way.
right, right. I'm just hoping you're not doing it more administrative tasks just for our benefit, so.
It's good for us just to, it was good for me to sit down and really hone in on it was a good reflective process, regardless of how many people read it. I would say that for myself.
Good.
But am I next?
Well, Ms. Whitson is supervising football, so I'll let you look at her report, and if you have feedback for her, I can take that back. So we'll just give you a minute to look through hers, because you just got that one.
One other comment on the report. You know, it's a one-pager, I don't think it's terribly long, and I don't want them spending a lot of time worrying about what we're reading. But I appreciate what's here, so.
I guess my question would be, the two that we just got tonight, if we have some time to look over these, is it appropriate for us to follow up with questions directly to administrators? Or
Definitely.
would you prefer to go?
No, definitely to
you?
the administrators, yeah. And you can always, I mean, CC me on it as well, because if there's follow-up that's needed, it's just nice, we can put it on the admin meeting that we have weekly if we need to. So yeah, definitely, I think any of the administrators are open to any questions at any time. But, yeah, so like tonight, Brayton's here for the facilities meeting, and so it was, okay, then who's gonna be the administrator that's out at the football game? So there might be times when they're not here, so we wanna make sure there's that consistent information you're getting, even if they're not physically present, so.
All right, so, Ms. Woods, are you ready to go right now? All right.
Yep. And I do have an addition, like, I wrote on there, and again, this is something you guys can say yes, no, it's just something I'm used to doing, so I'll do it, and then you guys can tell me if you prefer to get that depth or avoid that in the future. So, culture-wise, one of the big things we've really got to hammer out, and I know this is part of what Mr. Weber's working on, but really how do each of us as a staff member play a role in that larger culture of learning? So that's kind of our work to come around that. We had an introductory PD to kind of bring all of our new staff together, catch up to where we are, and it's really time to look forward and build who we want to be. So that work is in progress. And honestly, my staff, as I listen and interact with them, the biggest thing they want right now is to feel supported and to feel like I'm going to follow through. And so I'm just really making sure that above all else, those two needs are being met, so that they see that that's the character and the modeling who we want to be. In regards to core instruction, we are taking a deep dive into literacy instruction, specifically those foundational skills. Phonemic awareness is kind of that introductory level, being able to manipulate sounds auditorily. Then we build into phonics. And so I would say research around literacy development has become quite it's a thick supported there's a roadmap per se. There's things we know now about reading that we didn't know when I was in school or when you guys were in school, and really supporting teachers with, they don't know what they don't know. And my gosh, those teachers, they want to fix that so badly that they are going to town. Those PLC meetings are not being wasted. They are trying to figure out ways to solve our current situation because none of them feel great about it. They want our school to be, exceptional, and it is in a lot of ways. But that core instruction is they're really trying to fine tune that literacy because we want all kids to feel confident as readers before we send them on to the middle school. So that's the majority of our core instruction work right now at this time. We're still working on proficiency scales and those pieces to get us really prepared for that standards reference grading movement across the district in August. I put the school-wide assemblies dates on there. I don't know if I gave you those already or not, but there they are on paper, so you can get those on your schedules if you'd like to attend. And then under my other category, that's the data that they just brought around. Was there any extras? I'll kind of walk you through what these mean as quickly as I can. The first page is reading fluency. That's what we refer to as CBMR, if you ever hear that abbreviation. But that is a child gets 3 leveled passages at their grade level and 1 minute to read each one, and it averages out their accuracy and how many words per minute. And each grade level has a benchmark across the state of Iowa about how many words they're supposed to be able to accompany correctly within that minute. So as you can see right now, as a building for grades 2 through 4, because they only take this in 2nd grade up, 1st grade does take it in the winter, but they haven't taken it yet. So we're leveled out at 48% at benchmark for that assessment. The back of that page is A Math, which is a fast screener that's really can throw all kinds of math. It's really just a screener that throws all kinds of questions at them at their grade level to get just kind of a dipstick of how much they can do at grade level. So that looks a little bit stronger as a 2nd through 4th. We are at 62% on that assessment currently. The 3rd page is called Fast Early Reading. This is the assessment that 1st and kindergarten take, and it's split up into lots of little subtests. Each time we take it, there's 4 different subtests. And you can see that we are at 60% on that test. However, one thing I would note is that urgent, that red section, you can see that it's a little more proportionate to what we want it to be. We would hope that would be about 5%. So this chart is kind of the first one that looks close to what we're after in regards to the percentage of kids in that urgent category. The next page looks even prettier. This might be the prettiest one I show you tonight. And that's early math. And right now we're at 83% proficient on those skills. And 7% in that urgent category. So those are some of the fast pieces that we took. The next page looks like this. That is trying to compile fast for you. And the colors are really my own made up colors. So I think 60 and below, to me that's a red, and it helps me see our lower areas. A yellow I place 61 to 79, and a green would be anything above 80. So that's why they're colored in that way. So you can see some great celebrations. We celebrated a lot with preschool because clearly what efforts they're making in math are getting students kindergarten ready for math. So that was a huge celebration when you look at this. And we've been able to spend a lot of time talking about those red boxes. In fact, my team started calling them ketchup, mustard, and pickles, and how we're going to get more pickles, they say. So it's been great conversation, and to see them act on that has been just helps me keep coming every day and get excited about the work, because they are digging in with all of this. The last one is a completely different assessment, this different colored one here. This is STAR reading, and this is a reading comprehension test taken on the computer. And this is the first kind of run at a digital literacy test for 3rd and 2nd grade this time around. But you can kind of see the outcomes of that first run. And then on the back is that grade level look again on the very last page of those proficiencies at grade level, and then across the board for 2 through 4 at 57%. So I wanted to share this with you as a baseline. This is where we're at. In most cases, there's only one place to go. So we're working on that. And I guess questions for you guys I have are, do you want to see this type of thing? Is this valuable to you? Would you like me to present it a different way?
I think that this information is very valuable to understand where we're at. And I know we've had a lot of discussions on what these numbers mean. Are they benchmarking numbers? Are they not benchmarking numbers? But, you know, to really understand where we're at, but then also give us a perspective of where we're at compared to others. That would be pretty helpful on this, because one question I have, like when we talk about these numbers, is being proficient or not. Is that proficient to the level they took the test at, so fall of their, you know, second grade year? Or is it what they're supposed to be by the end of the year?
Yep.
So snapshot of where they
Perfect
should be at that
question.
day.
Yep.
So how concerning are these reading numbers to you?
I knew these reading numbers when I took the job, and I'm not concerned about them. I know how, I've been through this process before. I feel very confident in my ability to shift this literacy outlook right now. So it's concerning, right? As a parent, I would be thinking, yeah, like, what are we doing? But at the same time, I know I have seen the staff, and they are willing to do whatever it takes. So to me, they just need leadership and tools and guidance, and I know they can fix this. So I'm not the least bit alarmed. In fact, I kind of want to show you how bad it is today, so that in a couple of months, you'll know how good I'm doing, you know?
So right now we got,
Yes, yes, yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
So right now, like in the reading, the fluency in reading, I'm just using that as a snapshot. I mean, 52% or below proficient. What's your expectation? We're like,
As a,
how do we know when you're doing awesome?
well, that's one of our building goals, is to be 80% proficient on that CBMR, the very first page. That's our literacy goal. In fact, we combined this page with the one that says early reading, so that we accompanied kindergarten and first grade into that goal. So page 3, if you will. And then the last piece that goes into that goal is preschoolers, and we're using letter ID and letter sound ID as their measures. So between this test, and that preschool data we're collecting on our own, because there is no measure, we can't do that any other way, the combination of those 3 scores should equal 80% at the end of the year. That's the goal that our team has set.
Thank you.
Yep. And then there's some other notes on there, but to me, just read at your leisure. I already said the highlights, they're working crazy hard, and I'm super impressed. And the only other thing I didn't really address is that we are getting shirts. We've had money donated from several organizations, which I listed there for you, to get shirts with our theme, which is Roadrunners Are Better Together. And we'll roll those out when they get here and make a big deal about that message. Any questions, concerns, thoughts for me?
Well, I personally look forward to celebrating these numbers as we move forward. So I appreciate the time you put into putting this together. I know you did it also because you need it, but
Yep.
Presenting it to us in that format was good. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, I love the data. The things that I was, like Roger, it's a relative game, so if I were me drawing these bar lines, I'd have state of Iowa where it's at, because they might put out stupid hard, and you're not gonna get to 80%.
Yeah.
Nobody's gonna get there.
Yes, so some things I should preface. The only data that I can kind of compare back and forth is the ISAS, because they don't put out, like, I can't tell you what Martinsdale, or like, there is no, I just don't have access to that.
Okay.
And that's one thing I have mentioned before, is how do we know where we stand? But I do know that 80% is most definitely attainable over doing the right things year after year. So I know that it can be done. I've done it. So we just got to figure out how to support these students and these teachers to get there.
And if there was a way you could put your goal as a line there, because
Ooh,
there's
yep.
nothing better and a feeling of engagement and a sense of accomplishment when the teachers get their kids there, right?
That's
because,
perfect. Yep.
Because then that turns it into, I made it, I checked the box, right?
Yep.
And then a sense of pride just goes up, and it just keeps rolling. So
Yep, I will find a way to put that kind of goal line across there.
yeah, and then I think
And
that
over
was-
time, I'll keep adding, so like this is fall, and then I'll add winter, and you'll be able to compare it side by side to see if those, reds are shrinking, the undesirable pinks and reds, and
the catch up.
yeah, the catch-up.
And then the only other thing I noticed that in the culture section, they talk about positive respect integrity, dependable, and effort, right? And then I didn't know if it was going to be into the elementary students, so it would just filter on through, right? Because you teach a kid this big, but
Yep, so that, we most definitely had those conversations. However, the elementary has done a lot of work around their PBIS, so they have these 4 kind of expectations that were already set in stone when I got here, and I didn't want to shake the boat or, you know, undo the work that they had done. So theirs are and have been, I don't know when they started, but I feel like it was many, many years ago, and theirs are be respectful, be safe, be responsible, and be your best. So it was kind of one of those, I'd like to get on the same page, but at this time I didn't feel like a big change was the best route. So someday I think we'll definitely get there. Yep.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Woods. Mr. Weber.
Kind of thinking you could put me up front next time, because that's the high bar just got set by these two. I'm a little worried about me up here, so. All right, so my position's a little different, as you guys know, so I'm trying to split apart how I reported to you and what I actually gave you. When I got here a little over a year ago, Ms. Dentlinger kind of tasked me with the culture work in the district. So all of last year, all of our PD that I spent, both in as a district group and in individual buildings, was kind of setting the tone of where we were at that point. And then as we got through the summer and started year 2, we kind of flipped the script on that to where do we want to be. So in our PD that Ms. Woods had kind of talked about, we started really laying out how to start creating our own belief statements about why we're here and what we want to do on a daily basis. You know, I kind of put mine out there to the whole staff at that PD on why I'm here and what I want to do on a daily basis and what I aim to do, knowing full well that every day you fail a little bit at it. And then how does that come together to creating that document, that living, breathing document that changes every day, to moving things from the culture to the culture of learning. I think we've spent a year discussing culture and where we want to be, how we want it to look and feel and all that, but how does that relate to the culture of learning? How does it impact students on a daily basis through teamwork, through communication, through what we're doing behind the scenes, and again, why we're all here. So I think we've made a very good step in that. I thought that first PD was our first all-day PD here, and so that I got to go first thing in the morning and set the tone, and I thought it went well. And so that's kind of where we're at as we continue to go forward. So our next PD will be breaking apart into, that one was full district, we'll be breaking apart into buildings, so I'll have smaller groups. And then we'll start looking at, they're going to come with their belief statement, and we're going to use that belief statement to create that document that of what we want to do and why we're here and what values we all hold to get there. So I'll stop there. Do you have questions about culture before I hit the special ed side and academic?
I'd like to ask one quick question. You know, we're getting, you know, the PRIDE acronym and everything that goes along with it is really being pushed throughout the entire, you know, K through 12 right now. How is that going into our activities as well? And are you guys doing anything with our coaches and sponsors for all of our activities to be able to work that into that as well?
Yeah, I think it's going to sound kind of backwards. I think last year as we started to build that Roadrunner Code of Conduct, I think if you look at that, it lives inside that pride. And so as Mr. Avante came here and really believed in that pride initiative, I think the two intertwine pretty easy. Now, have we sat down and specifically talked about pride with those coaches and how it relates? No. But are the conversations every day with coaches about how we act with our students, the bar that we set for our student athletes and what we're doing, do they correlate with that? Absolutely. And so I think it'll become now as we'll talk later in the things that we've added, as I'm sitting down with coaches at the end of every single season, which is different than the past, and going through that evaluation, that'll be a perfect time to say, all right, so how are we hitting these at practices? How are we hitting them on contests? How are we hitting them on the bus? You know, what are we doing to hit these initiatives? So I do think it'll correlate pretty easily. Okay. And then on the academic side, I reported from the special education side. And so coming into this year, we knew we had two kind of big tasks. One, not that anyone here would know anything about it, but you know, the Achieve system is a new special ed reporting system. The way that you write IEPs has been the same way, I think, since 2004, and it just changed. We had about 8 months of lead time to get ready for it, and then the whole state was pushing out at one time how you do that. So it looks a lot different. There's been a lot of trainings going along with it. again, really to identify what students need and how we can get them to be, to grow at the same rate as their peers. And so we pushed into that with a lot of our PD trainings. With that, we started the Read 180 and System 44 programs that we started last year in small bits and pieces, but then now across the board, all of our special ed students in the middle school and the high school that have reading goals are on that program and are using that curriculum as part of their SDI with those teachers. That direct instruction for special ed is different depending on the building you're in and the age you're in. It's really easy in elementary to say you have a certain number of pull-out minutes and I'm going to work with Mr. Little Johnny one-on-one or with two on the skill that they need. As you get older, there's this gray line where you need to hit where they're at and how to help them grow academically. At the same time, what's going on in your classrooms, what homework do you have, what tests do you have coming up, and how can we correlate the two and work on them at the same time. And that's something that I and the secondary staff have worked pretty hard at, and we're going to continue to work at to try and get better at, so that we're hitting those at the same time. So that's the special ed side. Any questions?
SDI acronym?
Specially designed instruction.
Okay.
So like if you have a student that is behind in math, let's say they're 2 years behind, or their numbers are too low and they've been added to their IEP, you're pulling them out to start getting them to try and catch up. So they need to grow academically faster than their peers to try and cut those gains. So then that way they can try and get even.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Yep. And I'll say, last spring when I was here, I reported, I want to say we exited 5 elementary students last year that because they had gotten up and they met their peers. We have 4 secondary students on 45-day tryouts right now that we all believe those 4 will be exited, so we're already kind of ahead of the game where we were a year ago. So I think it is working. Awesome. Thank you.
Superintendent report.
I left Mr. Weber's up there because I wanted to remind everybody it's homecoming week.
Oh,
So a lot of fun going on. Today we had Anything But a Backpack, which saw some crazy things in the building, but kids, I think, having a great time. So I think that goes a long way. So just reminding everyone, we've got a lot of activities scheduled for Thursday and Friday. So be looking at Facebook or contact the school if anybody out watching this wants to know what the schedule of events are. So just a reminder for that. I just have a couple of things. I was thinking about, and I can brainstorm with you ideas for the principal report to the board and what you want from mine, but really our goals are directed by the team. And so when they give you a report, that's how we're doing on those district goals. And so I'm going to give you just some feedback today on things that have come up or things that I think are important for you to have understanding of. But if you would like this written as well, since I'm always here, I don't know that helps, but I can definitely write more than this, just my notes here. So we have the IASB conference. This is something that I think Melissa was at last year. I know Roger's been to it. I think a couple other people have been to it in years past, but I can't speak highly enough about this because a lot of the presentations are about people who are doing the job that you're doing, and they're in the times that we're doing them. So when we were talking about making changes to policy, about health considerations, or we're looking at making policy changes about curriculum materials and libraries, all of those things, it's a great way for you guys to network with people that are doing your job in the time when they're dealing with the same things kind of on a national level, on a state level, and also locally. So I'm just throwing a plug out there. We did get the information for it, and I think you guys have probably seen this as well. But there's different things as far as kind of those timely topics, but then also a lot of things on budget, things on policy writing and making, things on meetings, how to deal with, public. So I just think it's definitely worthwhile. And if anybody, I'll be going. So if anybody would like to go, let me know. Cindy usually registers people, but it is currently scheduled for, it's usually in November. I should have had this marked, sorry. November 16th is the trade show, and then the pre-conference or pre-convention, so it's actually the first workday is the 17th, and then it concludes on the 18th. So the 17th and 18th are probably the days when we have the most options available, but you can always go to the trade show on the 16th. So just let myself or Cindy know, and we'll make sure that that gets taken care of as far as registration. RSI legislative priorities, we'll talk about that again when we kind of finalize our priorities in the actual actions for tonight. I was just going to give you an update. I went to not only the annual meeting, but then also the RSI legislative committee. I sit on that board, and it was, I thought, a really good conversation about things that most rural schools are dealing with. And it was very specific to how do we be proactive about continuing to lobby in a way that encompasses Iowa kids, you know, not just urban kids, not just rural kids, but how do we talk about Iowa kids? And how do we allocate funding for that? And what do we put our priorities on? And one of the things that I mentioned to a few of you is this idea of setting the state assistance for schools, the student assistance, and what does that look like? And what does it look like for nationally? What does it look like compared to other states? And so over the course of the next probably 3 or 4 months leading up to that legislative session, I'll be sending you information with those details. So if you are meeting with legislators, you have actual data that you can talk through with them. And I would encourage any of you that if you have questions about any of it, let me know. If there's a topic that you're hearing about and you want more information about, let me know and I can get you any of that information that you need. So really great meeting, a lot of positivity about being proactive. I feel like sometimes we feel like legislative actions are always reactive, and I like the vibe of being proactive and doing what's best for kids all the time, not just in reaction to something. So I'll give you an update after our meeting in October as we set those legislative priorities as a group. And then finally, I have on there the SIAC meeting minutes. Remember, this is the group that the board appoints to meet. It's the parent group and teachers and administrators that meet and really talk through things that are happening in the district, things that we have questions about. Maybe they're, again, national or state topics, but it's all about, is this applicable where we are? Is it something that we need to dig into more? A lot of times it's reviewing data. So I just put the minutes there. I know that both Jeremy and Melissa were at the last meeting, so I would welcome any feedback from them. But I do think there was a really good discussion. We hear a lot about social emotional learning. We hear a lot about money. I think I told the group that I was meeting with a representative from Joni Ernst's group who was they were getting ready to go write the legislation around the billions of dollars that were allocated for SEL at the federal level. And the conversation was what do we need to know from schools about this? And I think that's the million-dollar question, because unfortunately, mental health isn't, social emotional learning, mental health, all of those things aren't necessarily a school issue. A lot of times they're community issues, they're issues that people face at home. And so the question is, how can a school be a conduit, if need be, to support the community? And so I think that just keeping those conversations kind of at a local level, what do we need here, what's going to support our kids, and making sure that gets communicated is really important. So there was a good discussion, I think, around that topic, because as Jeremy and I were talking, if we asked everybody in the community, we asked everybody even in our building, what does SEL mean to you? We probably have some very different answers. And so I think just even that, there's a push for understanding SEL, but then is that the same thing as mental health services for kids and families or teachers? And how do those work together? Because SEL is social emotional learning, which everybody defaults to mental health services, but it's not necessarily that. It can be proactive. It can be how do we build strategies in kids to deal with things or cope with things before maybe services would be needed. So it's kind of defining what that is and being specific. But I think it was interesting to get feedback because we had such an eclectic group of people there that all came with a different lens. And so the information is there. So if you have questions about any of that, you can let me know. But that was the SIAC meeting from the other night, a couple weeks ago.
And I saw through, in the meeting minutes, there was other phone policies. I was just kind of curious what discussion was around that.
Say that again.
Phone policies was one of the meeting agenda that didn't.
Yeah,
go
so
on.
actually it was a student, one of our student
okay.
reps brought that up because there was, again, expectations, setting up and not having phones during school. So when you asked, how are you enforcing these expectations? Well, we get the evil eye once in a while when we ask kids to put their phones away. I mean, you know, like just what you would typically think from a teenager in response. And so she had just asked a question about, can we consider the phone policy, and what would we need to do to have that conversation? So I, of course, put her in touch with Mr. Bonte and Ms. Whitson, and I think they had a pretty good conversation. So that was just another. There's always a chance for community or anybody on the committee to bring something else up. So that was the thing she brought up, and yep. Right, right.
Are there any other questions for Mrs. Detlinger? All right, thank you. All right, discuss and approve consent agenda items. These do require a motion and a second for us to take action. We've all got our past meeting minutes and the monthly bills and financial statements, and I believe Ted put out the ones that didn't make it in time. We've got the resignations and contracts, and I will read through those. Maybe. Work my computer. Oop. All right. Lily Hausman hired as an associate. Jesse Helton hired as an evening custodian. Nancy Bright hired as a bus driver. Stephanie Good hired as NHS sponsor. Chad Stanley hired as high school assistant wrestling coach. Kevin Boyes moves to assistant high school boys basketball coach. Zach Walbacher moves to middle school assistant boys basketball coach. And Jesse Baldwin moves to middle school head boys basketball coach. We did have some open enrollment. An AED purchase and contract is in the consent items, and then the mower bid.
Right, so I'll just touch base on both of those.
Please.
So the AED, we currently have devices in the building, but we do not have one at the bus shed, at the CTE building, or in the middle school. So it's just to replenish, or to put one there in case we have an emergency. Obviously, the time it would take to come all the way to the middle, or to the elementary, way at the front of the building to get it when somebody's in the CTE building might be the difference between life and death, literally. So this is just to update all of those. And then the contract is actually an annual evaluation of the kids to make sure they're all up and they're all working and functioning properly. You have to change out the pads every so many years, and they take care of all of that in the contract. So Brandy Ransom, the nurse, recommends that highly because we don't want that to be something that gets lost, and it's really not something the janitors are typically doing. And so this is just to make sure that it's kind of on the checklist, just like we do with the fire extinguishers and all of those things that we use for safety. So that's the AED purchase and contract. And then the mower bid, we still have one, what I would call residential mower, that has been in the shop more often than not. And so I just asked Mr. Bedwell to get me some bids on moving that to a commercial. And so his recommendation is to go with Gravely, which is the first one. He said they've always been very receptive and very good about getting things maintained and making sure that if anything's broken, they work on it because kind of as a priority. So obviously that helps because it's the lowest bid, but he's recommending that we purchase a Gravely mower so that we can kind of make sure we're not spending more time in the shop than not. And that mower is, I think, 5 years old. So it's about time for a cycle. We're just asking to buy the commercial version instead of the residential because they obviously are built a little bit differently. So those are the two contracts that are in there.
This is a naive question, I know, but could an AED be used as almost a, like a kid to shock somebody else? I know that's a naive question, maybe it can't, but you have to have, yeah.
Not without a lot of effort.
Okay, all right, good. Yeah, no, I just,
There's a lot of steps.
yeah, like, you gotta make sure that they're hooked up right, okay, good. I just, yeah.
I guess I got a question. AED bid, I see one AED bid, and then there's a bid for, looks like a first aid cabinet?
Yeah, so again, out at the bus barn, because we don't have one, and
Oh,
that's.
so the
where-
first aid cabinets for
I'm
there.
sorry, yes, yes, it's an addition because we have that space and we have not outfitted it with, you know, materials for if something happens when somebody's working on a bus. And yes, there is one bid, and this is again, and I hate to say this, but we put out for multiple, and this is the one that came back. And this is the company that we used for the AEDs, so Brandy felt pretty confident that they would be solid to work with.
And there's only one bid for the AEDs as well?
Yes, because they bid them together. Well, let me take that back. She had asked if the company did it, and then when she sent out the bid, I think that this is the one that came back, and then the purchase contract was for the same company that does the AED, and then the first aid one was a different company, and I want to make sure I pull that up right, so I'm not misspeaking. Let me just pull that up. And I think I put them all on there. Yeah, this is the AED bid for the units that we're replacing. And then the service contract, that's all in the same one. And then the life med safety is the bid she got for and that one, technically, I mean, I put it on here because it's in that same house of updating all the safety, but that's one we would approve anyway, because it's less than the $5,000. But I just wanted you to be aware that we're doing multiple things with the safety to try and make sure we're prepared if something were unfortunately, happening, so. But yeah, I can get more feedback on that if you would like about the AED bids, but my understanding is that's the one that she's worked with before that did send the bid back, so I don't know if we have to go further out for some of those things, if you want us to go further out as far as how many bids we get, but we definitely can do that, but this is the one that she said came back, so,
I guess my question would just be, did we make a reasonable effort to get multiple bids?
yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a quick question. How are the bids put out? Is it on our website? Is it a system that?
We typically contact the companies. So if we know, I would say, like, we have the architects in here, so we just contact and say, this is what we're looking for. Can you give us a bid on what that would be? Roof, same thing. Now, some of them, if they're bigger projects, like the roof project, we sometimes do a sealed bid. And then we just make sure that everybody we've worked with or anybody that's local, we make sure we contact them and make sure they know that this project is out for bid. And I do think that, and Ted, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because Ted and Rick typically do the bids for those bigger maintenance type projects. That is a process that is kind of dictated by board policy, and so those are the steps we use. I can't tell you exactly, how it all works, but the notification, I know that because we're smaller, we typically contact the companies as well, personally, and say we're putting this project out. Wanted to make sure you were aware of it so that they can, bid it if they so choose.
You'd said that we were adding 3 new AEDs, but there are 4 on there for purchase. Are we replacing one of the ones that we already have?
Let me look. I'm sorry, the one that's portable.
We don't have anything for our exterior facilities, so during a football game, which would be a high reason that we might need it, or baseball, softball, so that one would allow it to travel.
It's portable.
Okay, thank you.
I apologize for not mentioning that, but
That would
Thank
also explain the hard case.
yes, because that goes with it. Yep. Make sure there's nothing else on there. It's been she sent me this a little while ago, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. this is one of those things, and you guys can tell me kind of how you want to direction this. We've had this conversation, Ted and I have, about the bids. You know, I think the board policy right now says anything over $5,000 for board approval, which I think we're all in agreement makes sense. Where we run into problems is if each one of them is less than $5,000. Do you want us to bring that when we're talking about each one is, you know what I mean? Like, because computers, same thing. Now, obviously, when you approve the technology plan, the technology one-to-one, I think you've given consent that we need to maintain that program. And so that would be something that maybe a little bit more clarification from you, what you would like more detail on. The mower bid, that's exceptional because it's more than, but it's one unit, right? Since this is 4 units and they're all less than $5,000, is this something that you want to see on the consent agenda? Would you rather, I mean, because we're just putting more of one thing that's less than $5,000, which moves it up over $5,000. So we can go either way. We've always been putting, I think, more on, and I'm okay doing that, but you guys can tell me if this is something that you want us to look at or change. I know some schools have upped that number, you know, kind of like they did with how much a person can make and still serve on the board. They've increased that number just because of inflation and costs and things. So if that's something that you like how we approach it, then let us know. But if it's something where you're saying, if these are less than $5,000 a piece, then we don't need to see it, however you want to go. But I know that Ted and I have that question, just to make sure we're getting you what you need, but also not inundating you with things that are just routine that we'll be doing because we need to make sure our facilities are safe, you know? So you guys can give us a little bit more direction on that, but we have that conversation a lot.
I would err on the side of just, it's more transparency, and so
Sure.
I like it.
Okay.
I think it's great to share because it's, I
Yeah.
think the public,
Especially
know.
since these aren't common items that you're buying every single year, you know, it's not like
Computers.
textbooks.
Yeah.
Textbooks are more than $5,000 when you write
Right.
a PO for those, but we're not approving every
Right.
textbook order.
Right.
But this is something
So some of those
maybe
anomalies.
every 5 years at the most.
Yep.
Would be my guess on AEDs.
Oh, yeah, not even then, because if we do the maintenance, they're gonna maintain themselves and they'll replace, so, yep. Yeah, that helps, so we'll keep going through that process. And I will make sure, that if we have extra bids, that there'll be a folder with the bids in it, so you can see, like we did with the mowers, so you can see the comparisons.
Anybody have any other questions on the consent agenda items? Not hearing any other questions, we do need a motion to take action to move on.
I'd move to approve the consent agenda items, including the mower bid for the Gravely mower.
and I'd move to second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda items, including the purchase of the Gravely mower. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Activities handbook updates. This does require a motion and a second for us to take action.
This is just the final step of most of the items we've talked about between July and August. The additional item to the activities handbook would be number 6, the non-discrimination policy that we added into the handbook. Otherwise, each one of these I've come to the board and talked about. I just want to get a final, this is exactly what we put in this year when we went through the final review of what's been used the last few years. And then obviously we'll continue to kind of refine and look at it. So I can hit each point if you'd like, but I know you guys have seen it, looked over it, we've discussed it. Again, that the only thing new to your eyes would be that number 6 policy that just needed to be in there, so. And in the actual handbook that we presented, I highlighted those areas too. Once approved today, we'll add the final handbook online tomorrow, so.
I appreciate you highlighting the areas that changed. That does help a lot.
Yep.
I would move to approve the activities handbook.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the activities handbook as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Legislative update. This also requires a Motion and a second for us to take action.
So this is a follow-up from our conversation that we started last month. I shared with you the legislative priorities that were kind of the focus last year with RSAI. And so you have the option of either we can have you fill out the survey, which I have included a link to, or we can just talk through what, I mean, I think you were all supposed to kind of look at that over the last month. We can talk through what those 5 top priorities are kind of as a board. So when we go to the meeting and we kind of delineate which ones are most important, we can make sure it's representative of what you guys want to put as those priorities. So if you want to just do the survey, we can. I think the conversation would be valuable, but you can tell me how you want to do this.
I'd be interested to see everybody else's top 5 to see if we have some good overlap on those. I can share mine, or I don't know the best way to do that. What's that? We got numbers?
Yep.
I've got, ready? 6, 7, sorry, scrolling, 16, 17. I only picked 4.
Okay.
Because I guess those were the most important for me.
I had 6, 7, 8, 11, and 16.
I had 6, 7, 12, 11, and 5. So clearly 6 and 7 were important, and then I went back to 11 and 5. So my top 3 would be 6, 7, 12.
I had 6, 7. Oh man, what was the other one? I had a question about transportation equity. I know they've made movement on it in the past number of years, but I don't think we're anywhere where we could see that be a equitable thing. So that was a big one for me too.
What number was that one? Sorry.
I'm looking.
13.
13.
Okay.
6, 7, 13 were the ones I identified.
Okay. Did you want to share, Monica, or we can talk about these? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to go in-depth into a lot of them.
Okay.
So I 6 and 7 are 2 of my top priorities from the ones that I've looked at.
I will tell you that number 7, we had quite a conversation on. For those of you that are looking at the screen, it's educator staff shortage and quality instruction. And we talked about those almost being 2 separate things. And so we had talked about breaking those apart so that we can look at how are we educating people to come into the teaching profession, and then how are we retaining people to stay in the profession if they're quality instructors. So we kind of broke that apart into 2 separate things, I think equally important, but we see a lot of really good people leaving the profession who already have the experience in the education, but we also have such a shortage of people with the experience in education that one we broke apart into two different items because we think both need to be addressed and maybe not lumped together. So just an update on that one. So it looks like if I'm looking at the numbers the way we have them, it's 6, 7, 11, and 16 collectively. So adequate school resources, educator staff shortage and quality instruction. 11 is sharing incentives and efficiencies, and then 16 is safety. Is everybody on board with those? anything that as you looked at those that you want whoever's at the meeting to advocate specifically for, things that you've either read about or things that you've come across that you think, you know what, we need to be paying attention to this, or anything that you want me to take with more information about?
To me, I think it's the teacher shortage and continuing to be creative on how we get prospective educators who may not or may not be licensed at the time, give them a pathway to get there that may be non-traditional. You know, we have that kind of, I don't know if they call it apprenticeship or not, but that's what I'd call it. Continuing to look for creative ways to make that happen, where we still have high-quality educators, but maybe they didn't take the traditional way to get there.
And then I would just, on number 6 and 7 really, is just the cost of living, and inflation's gone rampant. And I'm sure the educators or the legislators are aware of that, but when we're in, I mean, it's a time where things are jumping very significantly, and when a teacher or a staff member can go and probably leave public service to go and get a raise in a private institution, the magnitude of change is something we haven't seen since the 80s, and I think that just takes a whole mindset shift. And that's especially for the staff that are making, you know, the hourly rates. That's it takes a huge chunk out of their paycheck, and to have the budget in order to give them the raises they deserve, I think is extremely important, so.
And I think I'd like to hear more about 16, the school safety. Seems like that's a pretty hot topic, and, you know, I know there's some schools, you know, that are, or a school that I had heard of, regarding, you know, handguns for non-teachers, non-associates, people who, you know, to carry, and so I'd like to know more about that. What's the conversation around that? Is there training, you know, what's Iowa, what are they looking at?
I can definitely follow up on that. And when that kind of came about, that story, I think it's in northwest Iowa, where we had a superintendent that moved in that direction. I did visit with the emergency management coordinator and also the sheriff, and just said, give me your thoughts, right? Give us your ideas, give us your information. And so I think we would invite them to the board, just so that you guys can have questions and get those answered from people who are the experts in that area, because I do think that that's really important. And so I know that our public probably has questions about that as well. So if it's all right with you, I'll still have it on there as obviously a priority for us, but I think I would rather put that on as an agenda item for the next meeting, so that you guys have time to prepare questions for it. If public wants to come and hear some of those recommendations and things, and I'll see if they can be available for that meeting, so that then you hear what I hear, and then you can ask your questions specifically, instead of me trying to understand and go back to them. So I think both of them would be receptive to that. So if that's all right with you, I'll still have it obviously on here, but I think that conversation is kind of new, and so I don't want to voice, you know, what I think it is, because I don't know enough about it. So I would like them to come in, because I think this has been a conversation with them for a while. I know that Sheriff Barnes would really like us to be a part of an SRO grant, which I think our public has mixed feelings about that, having a shared resource officer in the building, and how do we sustain that financially? What does that look like? I know a lot of schools have kind of moved to that. That is one of the new sharing incentives that was approved. So we can share with even a city agency. But again, I don't know that that's, you know, that our public has that on their radar. But I know that that's one of the things, since I've been here, the sheriff has asked and has been trying to secure funding for that long term. But that's again, obviously the challenge. So let me put that on the agenda for November or October, if that's okay with everybody here. And then that gives you guys time to come up with your questions and things that you would like more information on.
And I would just like to know more about the article and maybe the instance in which the school board did approve it.
Sure.
Because it was my understanding after I read the article that it was no teachers. There were
Right.
no, there was maybe an associate or non-educatable or non-educators that had the ability to. And so I didn't know if there was some, reason for an SRO or, I know,
The
this is such a polarizing,
Right.
case that it's just like, I just want to know the facts. And sometimes, as you know, a 5-0 decision around here doesn't, like, there's always something behind it, right? And it was hard for me to understand in the article that I read that it was, if there were
What the
other
background was.
things.
Yep.
Would a conversation by the board, or at least a walkthrough of our security plan, be something we could do?
Sure. You bet.
Yeah, I think that discussion has merit, and we should have it. I don't want to limit the safety and security to just that, though, too. As far as our advocacy, I think we really need to continue to advocate for funds, because that adds into the funds that we can get for, cameras, additional training for our for our faculty. There's a lot of different things we can get funding for. And then, that subject still needs to be looked at and understood.
Yep. So we have a safety team. I'll have some of them available to present as well.
And maybe talk to our safety team too and say, as we're advocating, what are some of the things that are high on their list that we could be advocating for them? Whether it's additional training that they're looking for, or is there additional tools that they're looking for to, be able to keep our school safe?
And then now that we've had the discussion, if you think it benefits us to take the survey individually, or if we put it in
I
as a
think we
board?
can just take the 4 that kind of came to the top, if that's okay with you guys. And if you have
Fine.
anything additional, if we add another one, I think we're supposed to have about 5. So if you look at any of them and you say, I like 13 as well, then we can add that to the list. Because right now we have 4 that overlapped. So if you have another 1 or 2, just let me know.
All right, so we do need to have a motion and a second for us to approve the 4 items that we've discussed.
I'd move to approve to prioritize 6, 7, 11, and 16. Also taking into consideration any that Monica may have that overlap with the others on there to get to 5.
I'll second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the 4 items, 6, 7, 11, and 16. And it's been properly seconded. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Talented and gifted plan. Let's see if it goes.
Can't we put that at the complete end of the agenda so she has to wait longer?
Yeah. It's okay, I'm impatient.
Are you requesting to be moved?
What's that? I had middle school volleyball tickets, so I've been here a while. It's okay. I brought paper copies if anybody wants one. If not, it's online too.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now, so 1 second. And I will dump these, and I apologize. Usually I try and get these all in your board folder before the meeting, but circumstances the last couple of days didn't allow for that, so.
Okay, maybe I gave you guys too much information too. So if you want me to go less in depth too, that's fine, or more in depth. So GT goals for the year. I met with my ELP team, and it consists of 7 other teachers in the district. And we kind of established our 2 main goals for this year based on district goals, our building goals, and kind of where we're going with SRG. And we plan our goals on ongoing staff PD on differentiation strategies in collaboration with SRG, which we have already kind of started on that. Our first big PD with that will actually be in October. Provide effective differentiation for GT students that extend the core curriculum at appropriate levels of challenge. And that'll be a lot of collaboration during PLCs and stuff as they formulate their UBD plans and stuff throughout the year. Servicing GT students. So this year, with all the GT students that are on my roster, I helped create individual PEPs, so personalized education plans, for each individual student based on their goals and interests. So I meet weekly with students K through 12 to provide services. Their PEP includes student interest to drive individual goals. So examples, I've had some students this year that are designing computer games. They're building model cars. They're building Lego sets with over 500 plus pieces. We have some students that are helping with family game nights, which I'll talk more about later. Some students are doing pen pals. We have a couple of students that are creating a middle school newspaper. And I have a few students also helping with elementary STEM class. Again, like I mentioned earlier, I'll be meeting with teachers during PLC to support GT students in the gen ed classroom as well as pull-out classroom. I have monthly newsletters that I send out, and there's also an I-35 GT Facebook page if any of you guys are interested in like receiving those, or you want to be in on the news that I post each month. So our ELP team overview. So I listed out the 7 other faculty members that I have on the committee. We do have a few new people that joined our ELP team this year. We meet 1 to 2 times a month after school for about an hour and a half. We've modified the GT handbook. We've identified GT students every year. We're evaluating our program this year, and we're focusing a lot on the acceleration program and what that looks like. For COGAT testing, so COGAT testing is a screener that we use to help identify GT students. It focuses on what a student knows versus what they know. Focuses on how a student knows things right versus what they know. We are administering it in 1st grade, 3rd grade, and 6th grade this year. And we used to provide the test in the spring, but we have since moved it to the fall just because there's a lot of testing that we do in the spring. And it seemed like we were like giving them an abundance of testing at once, so we've moved it to the fall. That way it's more accurate data for the team to look at throughout the year. And the last thing I have for their discussion is family game night. And I have about 12 middle school, high school students assisting with it. I would have more, but I had to cap it because there were so many students that were wanting to help it that I didn't have enough things for them to keep their time occupied with. But our themes this year are Let's Make a Deal, Minute to Win It, The Amazing Race. We've changed it from Family STEM Night, you may have noticed, to Family Game Night. So we're thinking about changing the theme up every year. That way it gives us a different, interest in students and parents and families. I've had students reach out to local banks, and that they're already considering, some of the banks have already confirmed that they're going to provide supper for each night like they did last year. And we're working on fundraising and getting donations for prizes for each of the game nights as well.
So that one is in conjunction with our engagement with families and bringing families into the building. And just as a recap, Whitney and the team last year did a phenomenal job. We had 30 people for, I think, the first one, and by the end, we were up to close to 100 families and students and parents enjoying STEM nights. So I think that this obviously is still educational, but it serves also to get parents in our building, and so that's what that family game night is, I think, designed for. So.
And we've had a lot of parents already reach out and ask if we're going to offer it again this year, which is great, but I'm assuming we'll have to probably cap it at about 100 again, just because of funding and whatnot.
So does this replace family game night, or?
Yes.
Or, I'm sorry, replaces STEM night?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And last year we did 5, this year we're doing 3. I had some problems with kids that are involved in a lot of things, and they want to be a part of it, which is great, but I try to make the dates in between sports and whatnot, so that way they could still help out and not have to sacrifice, a basketball game or a volleyball game, etc.
And how better to get the kids involved and excited about something to have them plan it, right? I mean, just a great idea. So, good
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have to approve the plan.
So, yeah, let me
Yeah.
explain that. So, we submit a report to the state that just talks through our numbers, and that's something that we submit every year. That's the plan that we need approval on. And that, I don't know if that was shared, but I will get that to you. It's just the update of what we submit every year. It's the cover page of how many students we serve and what some of the highlights of the program were. So if that's not in there, I apologize.
It's there.
I thought it was in there, but I don't,
Yeah, it's in
that,
there.
she just
It's in there.
didn't talk about
Nope.
that, but that's the plan that we're approving, and that hasn't changed other than the number of kids being served and some of the activities we're doing, so.
Whitney, would you be willing to come back up and explain how you guys changed, how you are identifying the students? Thank you.
Last year, the ELP team talked about the number of students we were servicing through the GT program, and last year alone, or the year before, we were servicing the last 2 years about 120 to 160 students, which was about 5 to 10 students, if not more, in a grade level. Some grade levels we had 20 students, some grade levels we had 10. So last year, the ELP team decided to change the way we identify students, and we basically cut the roster in half. So there's only one of me, obviously, for K through 12, but we were able to service now, I think it's at like 60 to 80 students, and there's about 5 students in each grade level, so I have 5 slots. So if we're looking at like the MTSS tier, the bottom tier, you have 80% of students should be in the core. The second tier, you have about 10%, and then the top tier, we made it to be about 5 to 7%, so that way I would have enough students to do group activities with them. So we're identifying students with high achieving scores in math or reading. Okay, some are both, but I have 5 slots. So we look at the data, and we look at trend data. We don't just look at the current school year's data, we look at past year's data, and we determine which of those students are consistently in the top 10% of the class, or consistently, like have made a lot of growth over time too. It's not necessarily all the kids that have, been in the top 10% of the class, but maybe they've showed a significant amount of growth over time too. And that's how we identify students, but it's using like the iReady test, we use FAST, we use ISAS, we use the COGAT data. It's just any data that we can get our hands on, we use it to help identify GT students.
Thank you.
All right, this does require a motion and a second for us to approve the plan.
I'll make a motion to approve the talented and gifted plan as presented.
I'd second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the talented and gifted plan as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Facilities planning update for information only.
So this is kind of a progress report, I should say, about where we are and next steps. So we have, I see Rick Seeley in the audience, and Joe Wallace, and Brayton obviously is on the team with us. So I know that we have some of the board members also sit on the team for this, so please contribute at any time. But we wanted to give you an update of where we are and what our next steps are, and talk through kind of if you have questions or if you want anything else updated, we get that information so we can get it to you before we bring kind of our master plan to the whole team. So, great.
Like we've reported before, so we started last spring interviewing teams of students, teams of staff, bringing in community members, trying to be transparent and get what are the needs and what are the wants, and we're going to need to start identifying the difference between the two. And so through that, been working with Mr. Seeley, Mr. Wallace here quite a bit, been meeting almost monthly with that executive meeting, kind of kicked off with the community last month, having him in to see exactly that work that we're doing that I know Mr. Wallace is going to go through here in a minute. And then we're preparing then to have the community again in identifying probably the 3rd week of October to really start throwing, renderings, ideas, numbers, realities of where, if we want everything, where is it going to be? And if we can't get everything, okay, what do we need to start taking away? Again, the difference between need and want. So that's kind of where we're sitting right now. So to let Joe take over here and walk us through where their team is at from OPN. So there you go.
Yeah, so thank you for allowing us to be here and give this quick little update. We'll make it pretty brief. Obviously, we did a community meeting that we had a much more information, much more detail, and we're happy to share all that as you see fit. So, quick agenda. So, who are we? I'm Joe Wallace. I'm a project architect with OPN Architects. We worked on this addition, as well as have been working with the district on some of the fact-finding and master planning effort that Brayton talked about. Also, Rick Seeley is with us too with OPN Architects, and then one member who's not here today, Mike Murphy, with Larson Engineering, has been critical to the team, and his expertise has been greatly accepted as well. So as Brayton mentioned, we have done, we'll just hit on some interviews, observations. We'll kind of skip projects under consideration because it's really to the observations, and then some of the public community survey results. All right, so on the interview front, we, as Brayton mentioned, we met with students. We did interviews, much of the same exercises that we did at some of the community events. We talked about everything from, the high school all the way down to outdoor facilities, the campus, kind of outlining all the things that were going really, really well, all the things that maybe could use some improvement. We also met with some faculty and coaches, administration, and then, as Sharon mentioned, the committee, and then the community members as well. All right, so tour observations, I'll keep this brief here. So some of the indoor renovations, we looked at the science area. So chemistry and biology could be laid out a little bit more efficiently. There were some storage needs in there, and there's also some layout things with older casework that could be redone in a little bit more efficient way and allow for more students and more of a beneficial learning environment from that standpoint. A mental health or at-risk space was desired, so that would be a really great space tying into a lot of the things that the board has already talked about today. Daycare pre-K, the facilities are generally in really good shape, but what we heard was that we could use more of them. So we could serve more kids as well. So additional classrooms, storm shelter, and then even a public gathering space that could serve the greater community as well. Indoor athletics. So we looked at the competition gym and the wrestling room and some other things. Just minor button up some things here, but generally the bleachers are aging and in need of replacement. And then obviously the big one is that we heard over and over again was the AC, air conditioning. Outdoor athletics, so this is normally where Mike would step in, but we heard a number of different things here. The natural grass fields, there's some leveling issues. It's just general maintenance that goes into those. So those could be re-leveled or infilled for safety of our student athletes. Synthetic turf was desired for the stadium as well. So this is for a number of different reasons, but the big one is being able to use it over and over again. You don't need to, with natural grass, you kind of can only use it a certain amount of time, and less general maintenance and upkeep for that. The stadium, the current stadium is oriented east and west, and nowadays it's preferable just with sun pass and shadows and glare to orient that north and south. And the track was recently painted, but that structural layer is wearing down, and that is one thing that we observed would be in need of replacement over the next few years. More parking, heard that loud and clear at the community meeting. The press boxes, visitor bleachers, and baseball and softball bleachers are aging as well. We observe to be aging and are in need of replacement or upgrade. And then the baseball and softball fields, again, unevenness with that. And then Again, more safety would be the field lighting. We know that in some football games, we heard that has malfunctioned before. We heard some questions about the lighting levels with those as well. All right, so I mentioned the community meeting a couple different times here. This was a great meeting. We really enjoyed doing this. If you want to go to the next one there, we called it the Facilities Forum. So this is some of the data that you're seeing here. So we did a word inquiry here, what we call it, and these were some of the things that the community mentioned. So I'll just hit on a couple big ones: pride, community, tradition, family, welcoming. So this can be the vision for the master plan. It's something that we as designers will continue to refer back to over and over again as we work towards the master plan and that the facilities improvements. And then which facilities are most in need of improvement. So again, this is kind of touching on some of the things we heard from the different interviews and tours, but the outdoor facilities, number one, daycare and pre-K, indoor athletic facilities, and then some of the high school classrooms, and then middle school and elementary towards the bottom. And then which projects are you most excited about? And this is unique for us as designers, but it's very even. And it was kind of as you know, we want it all. So that was really good, really cool to see that kind of everything had an equal slice, and that just generally we hit on all the right things. All right, so what's next? So we had one community meeting. Obviously today we're giving the update on the process. In October we will have another community meeting. And then after that meeting, we'll share a little bit more, as Braden mentioned, we'll share a little bit more of the graphics and some of the things that we're working on, and true numbers. And then after that, we'll button up the master plan, and we'll deliver the document to the board and the district.
No, thank you for going through that. Could you just bring us up to a high level as to what we're trying to achieve through the master plan? And I think that context is extremely helpful for when,
Sure.
the why.
Yeah, sure. So as we've talked, there are lots of reasons for this. We look at our facilities and obviously the opportunities it affords kids. And so the goal is, how can we maximize our facilities and also keep taxpayer dollars in mind as far as making sure we can continue to offer quality programs, make sure we can continue to offer first-rate facilities for our kids, and still be mindful of taxpayers. So as a board, I think you've made very conscious efforts to be in a position to continue that work. I look at it from some of the things that I'm spending time on. Our daycare, and I think Mrs. Woods can tell you, we get calls all the time about, do you have openings? Do you have a birth to 3 program? And it's such a community need, and we've realized that our numbers have increased since we started our 3-year-old program. So it's kind of a service for our community, but it also helps instill that Roadrunner pride at an early age, and we tend to see those students stay in our system. Whereas before, maybe they went to Norwalk because that's where daycare was, and it was just easier for parents. So when I look for opportunities for funding for that, having a facilities plan, a master plan of what we want to do over the course of the next 10 years, helps us make some of those recommendations to the board about how we're allocating money. So for example, if we know that there's a safety issue with our bleachers right now, and we have to do some replacement of that, is that something that can then be converted if we know the community supports doing a new stadium? Are those things that we can move from, if we buy them next year for safety purposes, can we move them and put them in the plan in future, right? So it's an idea of how are we allocating money, knowing what the big picture is, so as we start to chip off pieces of it, we can make sure we're kind of in line with what our long-term vision is and get that community input for that process. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I think that's kind of the direction of that committee. And so it's exciting. But again, when we look at this, we asked, what are all the things you could possibly want? And we were told, but it's exciting, but it also, we know we're not going to be able to do all, so we just have to start to now prioritize.
Exciting but overwhelming, and if I
Yes.
could repeat back, so it's first getting the organization, understanding the prioritization, the projects in scope, putting together a plan to kind of map it out, how we would lay it out, so that we have the components to say if we have $3 million worth of capacity on our borrowing, we could do this one, or, and it just knocking it off the list. So it's
Correct.
basically no different than what you do for bus planning, right?
Correct.
Except you're doing it for facilities. It's being
Correct.
intentional.
Correct.
Okay.
Well said.
And then, and then the other part I think was important was the interviews. And so if you could go into a little bit more depth of who you interviewed, you know, to get these ideas and kind of dreams, I guess, out here, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so absolutely. So we sort of started with the initial committee, and we highlighted, kind of started big picture on everything. You know, obviously we knew there were a few areas that really we already knew that we could hit off the list really quick. And then we met with the students. So there was, man, we met with probably 12 students. Yep, all grades, all representing all different sports. So that was more athletic focused, but we did hit on, you know, other curriculum things, FCS, science, media center, some of the really big picture about some of the other areas as well. And then we met with the faculty staff, so that gave us a chance to talk to science, FCS, now I'm missing some, and all the coaches in different facilities and that side of things, which one allowed us to understand where we were, but also big picture, as Sharon mentioned, we could think about the next 5, 10 years, and even beyond.
And then lastly, I like your optimism on that pie chart about how it was so evenly split. From a board's perspective, you're going to make a third happy and 2/3 unhappy, and so.
Eddie, you've been through this before.
Thank you.
Can we get a copy of that? Is that
The what?
the PowerPoint?
You bet.
Okay, great. What's the next, what's the next public meeting? What do you anticipate? What does that look like? Is it going to be similar to what you had for the last one?
Yeah, so the last time was really, again, about gathering the data, understanding priorities, as you mentioned. This one will be more about actually reacting to master plan, to seeing the lines on the drawing, to see on the floor plans, all the different things that we're considering here, as well as potential layouts and things like that with graphics that go with all that. That's the main one. So understanding that sort of thing and helping to, again, kind of funnel in on the prioritization, or I guess the public perception of where the need should be spent first.
So just a little bit more clarity. So one of the things that we've talked about is a daycare. And if we know that that's a priority and we know we need classrooms right away, then how can we do that knowing that we also might need a gym in the future, right? So as we're making a plan, can we put stage 1 in knowing that we're going to put stage 2 in and we know where it's going to go in 10 years, right? And so I think the idea is now to put the price tag with the cost for this. I can tell you that even if we bonded everything that we had, we would not be able to cover the price tag for our wish list. But I do think if we put it in front of people and say, okay, this is what, and we're talking about what the layout would look like, what this facility could look like, what, you know, and we start to say, oh, maybe we don't need that, or maybe that can be in a separate phase. So it's going to be starting to really finesse that master plan based on cost, based on what the projects all are. So I think if you look, there's different, I don't know what you called them on the spreadsheet.
Different
phases,
groupings.
or what were they?
Groupings.
Groupings. And so if you look at the groupings, this was all of our wish list. Well, we need to cut it down by X number of dollars. So what are we taking off of that? That was maybe a really nice to have, but not a need to have. And so we're going to start working through that with the public. So when we bring to you, we've got community input based on what the dollars are, what the projected layout could look like, all of those kinds of things.
So do you have it where it's broken down by what is a safety issue and what is a want? I mean, I know you've talked about the bleachers, but I think for me, I mean, I know what the bleachers are because I've walked up them, but other things, I don't know.
Right, and I think that's something that we could easily mark on the list, that this is something that we'll do regardless, because we know it's a safety issue. Like, if you look at the football field currently, we have high jump pits, not high jump, I apologize, long jump pits that have a concrete pit. The concrete is all the way around. Well, when you're playing football, that's a safety issue. And so we have to do something with that. The question is, what do we want to do knowing what our plan is in 5 years? And so we've got a quick fix now. I think they put a carpet over it or something, but obviously it's not a long-term solution. So yes, I think we could easily mark the things that are the safety concerns, bleachers in the gym. We've had concerns about kids falling from them, so some of those things. I think we can earmark those, and I'm not sure, I'll leave that to Joe as how he does that. But that's kind of, it's twofold. What do we need to do that we know we're going to do, and what do we want to do, and how can we merge those so that we're not double, we're not spending twice as much money or not thinking long-term, so.
And some of those safety issues are safety issues now, and safety issues, can those press boxes make it 10 to 12 more years or not, without just banding and band-aiding and banding? The answer is no. So then it's like, okay, so then are we renovating? Are we doing something more? Because though it's not right now, like maybe the stands or long jump, it's going to be, so we need to plan ahead for it. So.
And I guess just to add on to that too, organizationally, we've sort of thought about it as a menu with like an a la carte. So we can, with these different groupings, we can pick off the things to be able to create the right scenarios that work with priorities. So right now we've started way, 10,000 feet, and we're starting to funnel in and understand the different groupings and maybe ways we can organize them to have the best benefit to the district.
This is a good process, and when we started talking about the auditorium, the CTE building, Eddie, you'll have to refresh my memory. I don't even know if we had the elementary lunchroom on our list, but through the process, we discovered it was a need. And, this, I think the original renderings of this space here changed drastically from day one to what we're in today. And today we have a great auditorium. The money came down. I mean, it had to. There was no way it was feasible because we have to work through that too. This is a great process. I loved it the last time. I think I'll like it this time too when we start talking about these things and seeing more concrete plans. So.
One last thing. We've written you a contract to get to point X. That X is, here's your master plan, correct? At that point, it's what do we decide we're going to do with it next, right? So that's going to get us through that next public meeting, here's your master plan. Okay, so that's what we've agreed to as a district at this point, so. Okay.
To wrap up facilities, our junior varsity football team is beating Des Moines Christian 24-0 right now, if anyone's interested, so I'm going to get back out there, so thank you. Thanks.
32-0 into the third.
Thank you for the updates, guys.
Thank you.
All right. That moves us on to unless anybody else had any other questions or statements or the CAR Certified Annual Report FY 22. Ted, are you ready?
Just like everybody else said, this is a lot of material. Can you hear me? This is a lot of material, so we probably won't cover every detail of it, but unless you want to. Let's just start with the budget crosswalk. That's the top sheet. It's got all the funds on it. Just starting, the public won't be able to see this, so I think what we'll probably do is post these to the agenda, and that way if they want to look at them, they can.
Put them on the website too.
Yeah, that way it's available. It just was too late to get this out electronically for the board meeting. I apologize for that, but that's how it worked. So just going down the first column, that's the general fund, and it shows all the revenues. And then down at the bottom are all the expenditures. I'll show this on another sheet as well, but the beginning fund balance was $2,189,687, and we ended with $2,127,382.57. So that's good for a whole year. You can see the same thing with the student activity fund. I won't go through it on here because I think another sheet will tell us more clearly the treasurer's report. So I think what I'll do is just ask if you guys have any questions on this before we go on to the next one. There's a lot of detail, like I say.
What's the student activity fund? What is that?
That's Fund 21, and that encompasses all sports and activities.
So to pay for the refs, to pay for
Right.
admitting to a game or for uniforms? Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And I think your point of pointing out the beginning balance to the ending balance was just to show that we weren't burning cash, right?
Right.
And so
Yep.
nutrition fund increased significantly throughout the year.
Yep, that's a good one to bring up, Eddie.
Right, that's one of the ones that changed significantly from beginning to end. Might be a little color.
Yep, we started with 28,000, and we ended with 225,000. And as you recall, we had free lunches and the federal reimbursement rate for all those free meals.
Yep,
The rate was larger than if we would sell them.
interesting.
So
Got
that's
it.
just how it worked.
And so we were able to shore up that fund, and now we're charging for meals, which would be at a lower margin, right, to us, it sounds
We
like.
actually did raise we're trying to keep that fund
Yeah.
solvent so that we don't have a
Good.
problem in a couple years.
Okay, thank you.
Because if you recall, several years ago, we were in the library before COVID, or I'm not sure if it was before COVID, but I think it was. And we were going just the opposite. And the concern was how are we going to get through the year without a deficit?
Yep, I do remember those years.
So,
Thank you.
yep. So the next one is the transportation report, I believe. It's on my sheet. Is that the one that's listed? And this just shows the different costs that we had throughout the year. I did not, I believe Roger had said something last year about it'd be nice if we had comparatives from the prior year. I wish I would have done that for you. I ran out of time because of having COVID and stuff. But I can get you those and compare them. But I did look at fuel. Fuel went up significantly from the prior year. It was in the $50,000 range last year, or 2 years ago, and now it's $92,000. So we'll be looking at those when we work harder on our budget in the next few weeks, next month, and we'll be preparing to make sure that we're not going to overspend by large amounts. Because with inflation, I think that could be a real possibility. So I think the third one is probably, which one is that?
Expenditures.
Expenditures, okay. Okay, and it starts out with all funds, and then it goes about showing each different fund. So oftentimes people wonder, what does our district spend? And it's about $15 million last year for all funds. And if you ask the question about the general fund, it's more like 11 million on the second page. each fund is broken down, you know, as you can see, the management fund, the save fund.
So this is just a more detailed report of that first page.
Right. Yeah, each page, after you get past the first one, breaks down by fund, as you can see.
Do we still do that 5-year forecast? Like we look out a few years in advance or
Forecast 5.
forecast 5?
Yeah, we're working on that as well.
Yeah. Because
And-
I think with these, you know, there's going to be some costs that are fixed, but there's going to be a lot of costs that are going to go up 8, 10, 12%. And insurance is one, you know, we're on that insurance committee that I just worry that premiums are going to go, you know, and just
Right.
throw a wrench in our, you know, plans. And so it just seems like there's a lot more variables in here that are going to move more significantly than ever before. And it's hard to project everything, but
Like electricity,
yeah,
as we
right.
get more of the building air conditioned.
Right,
That
right, it was
goes up.
25,000 on the, and that's a monthly bill, right?
Right.
Right. I
It
mean,
probably
there's-
was higher.
Then you
this-
can be able to run some what-if scenarios too, as far as if insurance does raise 8%, what does it do?
Right.
And what trade-offs are we gonna have to make?
Right.
And we kind of do that every year. We look at that as the rates go up. Excuse me. As the rates go up, we do look at different plans or ways to tweak it,
Yep.
or we share the burden more, I guess. I think probably, I just would like to have you take these home and look at them. And if you've got questions, give me a call and I'll try to explain to the best of my ability to how it goes, you know. So the next one, let's go with revenues by fund by source. And this shows all the revenues that we receive. The first one is, the first page is all the funds. That's really what it is. And then it's just a 3-page report. So, for instance, if you want to see how much our federal revenue was, I believe it was 1.2 million when I looked at it earlier. Now I can't find it. $1.3 million. And a large part of that was 632,000 in the enterprise funds. And there was a time when, before last year, I believe, our federal revenue was always under 750,000. So that's how much that's had an impact recently. Okay,
So that federal is like COVID money.
right.
So that obviously it has changed and we won't see that continuously, but that has offset conveniently. It's at a time when we know costs are going up, but we're not going to have that beyond 2024. And once we use it, we're done.
And I believe we've kind of looked at that just recently again, that we have enough for the ESSER money, the COVID money. It's kind of equally distributed each year through 2024. So it's not like we're going to use it all up this year in 23, right? Okay, so the next one, let's go with the SES, Special Ed Supplement. The main point of this is the front page, and it shows that our special ed deficit is $226,531.65. So that's what we'll be having you vote on or approve shortly. That's comparable to last year. I believe it was 259 last year, in the ballpark there.
Haven't we previously talked about how that is continually a deficit, right?
You want to know why we currently have a deficit? Okay. So the revenue is based upon the prior year's head count for the special ed count, and that's taken in late October, I believe, or November. And then that counts for the revenue, and then the expenditures are based upon the actual teacher costs for those that serve, any one-on-one or shared associates, any costs that go into the special ed program that you wouldn't have otherwise. Do you have anything to add? Okay. So again, I think that's the important part of that one. The next one, the balance sheet by fund, and then the treasurer's report. The treasurer's report probably is the most important one other than the special ed supplement tonight, just because we need to present the fund balances to you. So that's what we're doing there. I won't go through the balance sheet numbers just because they're pretty self-explanatory, unless you want me to.
We have no floating rate debt, do we? Or is
What's
it?
that?
We have no floating rate debt, do we? It's all fixed rate?
Right.
So like, yeah,
Yep.
okay.
I also think it's important, and I don't know, new board members, this is, and probably existing board members as well, is that the way school finance works is they limit the amount of money you can have in certain funds, or as, you know, like a solvency ratio, or as, so you can't be over, let's say 25% or 20% in different funds. So if that's information that you would like more information about, so when you look at, you know, I think of our general fund as a perfect example. You see the beginning balance there. I'm on the treasurer report by fund, and our beginning balance was 2.1 million, 2.189, and this year we're at 2.127, and everybody will say, okay, so, you know, now you've got less money that you've saved, kind of, so to speak, but at the same time, some of the other funds that are not general fund, management fund, some of those might have shifted, as you can see on here. But we also have to make sure we maintain a solvency ratio or some of those other matrix that the state has designed so that a school can't hoard cash. If we collect money from taxpayers, it's meant to be used for students. And so they just have mechanisms in place to make sure that that's what's happening. So while we see sometimes a dip, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And sometimes, you know, I've talked with business managers and superintendents where the board has said, we don't want anything above 15%, you know, and so they've set a threshold. And so sometimes they spend down so that they make that 15%. Now, I don't know that we've had a conversation to that level here because I think we're pretty comfortable with where we are. But if that's something that the board wants either more information on or a review of, kind of what those thresholds are, just let us know, because it might look odd that some of those funds are going down, but sometimes it's intentional to stay within those thresholds.
Do we
That's right.
still subscribe to ISFIS?
Yes.
It's been a number of years, but we had a entertaining evening session where solvency ratios, all that good stuff was explained to us, a little less than a fire hose being like shot at us, but not much less. But it was a good evening where we really dove into those things. And I think I walked away with a better idea of why we do what we do and how we do it. So I don't know if we can secure that kind of a training again, but maybe that might be worth it.
Well, I think the Iowa School Board Association financial seminar may be similar to that too, if we have an opportunity. I've taken the 101 twice. I'm contemplating taking it a third time. I'm not sure if I'm ready for 201 yet.
I still learn when I go into those.
But that may be an alternate way to get up, and that's actually coming up pretty soon, so.
And we did look at the Forecastify tool just before I got COVID. I was looking at that just to see how our numbers would fall. And they're in a good place. And maybe next month I can have that where we can at least close up last year and see those numbers and see what our solvency ratio is. You know, and hopefully our UAB stayed steady or dropped a little bit, because like Sharon said, we're in the like 22% range. She'd like to see that dropped a little bit, and I keep telling her it's gonna drop on its own, but with all the ESSER money, it's hard to get that. But you don't want it to drop to 10 or whatever, but you want to get it to, like, keep it around 20 and then keep it managed there. And I think we have managed it well.
So I think this is just my observation, that we're getting into a level here where this is what's required by the state for us to file, and this is the reports that we're given. I think it'd be super helpful, but that's the equivalent of the board, of the administration giving us a report exactly outlining what they're doing for curriculum on the preschool, you know, for the preschool teachers. Here's what they're doing. And so I think it'd be super helpful from my perspective to kind of boil it back up to the 10,000 foot level and say, here are the most important ratios that the state or whatever, the solvency ratio, the spending authority, and just go through those main metrics and how they've trended over the past 5 or 10 years in our district, and then versus the overall schools as a whole, because then that gives us, again, it brings us back up, rather than worried about, you know, hey, we spent $52 at Egley's Hometown Supply for, you know, we get back to the level that we should be flying at. And so I think that would be extremely helpful for me, and I don't know, I don't speak for the other board members, but like if I were a new board member looking at these without having the benefit of going through that Larry ISFIS, it was, I would be just like, where do I
Well,
even
you know,
start?
I strongly second what you're saying there.
We need to, yeah, just, that's just my,
Larry puts together that interactive map tool, whatever you want to call it, where, you know, you can bring up like solvency ratios and of just about any school district you want, you know, and see what the trending was, and it goes back years, so.
I think we can get that for you for next board meeting with the Forecast 5 tool. It's there. It's just now that our numbers are final, we can upload the final data, and then that'll print out. It won't be any work at all.
and I think that'll be,
Backup is really good, but having a summary for the board level saying, you know, general fund started at this, it ended at this, and if we want to know what happened in between, here's how we get into it.
Right. And I think, you know, and I'm not, because this, I get it, right? There's a lot here, but part of this is we are also supposed to report out on our core report to the board. So this is one of those things where I'm not diminishing, because I think you're exactly right. We can pull out the 7 indicators of financial health in a district, and that's that level you're talking about. And then this, I think, and using that as our matrix helps to then understand why these numbers are the way they are. So maybe next year we can start with that. We'll bring it for the next meeting. But next year we can start with that, and then if we need to dig in to those specifics, we'll have those available for you.
And I think trending is important with that, like a 5-year trend and benchmarks. So if we get trending and benchmarks of other Iowa schools, those would both be very helpful.
Yeah, and we can do that by similar size schools. We can do that by schools close to us. So whatever, you know, we can try a couple of different models and see what works best.
Whatever seems applicable.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep, definitely.
I have to file my taxes every year, but I don't take my wife through all these details. She'd
I
say,
get
what's
it.
the check?
I get it.
Well, I was wondering if it was
This
a good
is-
idea today.
No,
or-
we have to, right, I get it. That's right, that's right. So,
Okay. Thank you. Let's do the vote then on the annual settlement. That's actually the treasurer report. That's all that is. So for F,
So the last document you had.
right.
So we'll go ahead and move on to discuss and/or approve the FY22 financial annual settlement. This requires a motion and a second to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve Section F, discuss and approve 2022 financial annual settlement.
I would second that.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the fiscal year 22 financial annual settlement. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, now we'll move on to the application for special education deficit. This does require a motion and a second as well to take action.
So I can talk about this while Ted's taking notes on that. This, as Monica mentioned, is what the cost of our special education program is. And the reason why we approve this every year is because our population changes. So the number of kids that get tuitioned in at a rate sometimes fluctuates. So sometimes we might have kids that come in and need 2 associates as opposed to 1. Well, that cost isn't one we would necessarily have planned for. So this deficit is pretty typical in Iowa schools, and I can get you the number of how many schools run a special ed deficit, but the idea is, in the attempt to be as transparent as possible, we know that program fluctuates so much based on student need and individual need. And so when you look at those numbers, and I don't know if you had a chance to kind of flip through those, it tells you how many kids come in from other districts and what weight they come in at. It tells you how many of our students go to other districts and what weight they're at in the other districts. So all of those things factor in addition to the programs that we offer here. So I will tell you that we did see an increase in the number of kids that are coming into our school systems with some IEP needs. And I will tell you that there's a conversation about, gross motor skills and what kids did when they weren't in school developing at that age, and now seeing just some catch up that we have to do with that, where a student might be in special ed for something like that, and then they're phased out as a result. So this, like I said, this, and Monica pointed out, this number fluctuates, and the idea is to break that down so everybody understands when we bring this to the board, because this is one of those things that we'll ask for additional SBRC funding for. This is where that number comes from. This is the cost of our special education program, the dollars that we bring in for it, the dollars we send out for it, and what the cost is for the students that we serve every day that are our resident students. So the number that we're asking you to approve for that application for this school budget review is $226,500, I don't have my glasses, 531 or 581? 531.65.
What's the alternative, like, if we don't approve it? I'm asking only because I just don't, like, we can't not service these kids that need the help. And so if we don't, I just don't know, I don't even understand really if you could help.
You lose the spending authority, and then
there you go.
UAB will drop automatically.
And so this is one of the reasons why we talk about these things, because the spending authority is one of the most, you can have tons of cash and no spending authority, and then you basically have cash but are insolvent. That's one of the things that I took away from Larry's meeting 5 years ago or whatever, so. Okay. I move to approve the application to the SBRC to receive additional spending authority for the fiscal year 2022 special education deficit as presented.
And I'll second the motion.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the application of the School Budget Review Committee to receive additional spending authority for the fiscal year 2022 special education deficit as presented. All those in favor signify by aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? All right. That brings us to the end of our agenda. I'd like to thank everybody for our wonderful homecoming meeting. We haven't done one of these for a while, so. Is there anything we need to know going into the next meeting, which will be scheduled for October 24th?
I guess I'd like to say one thing quick. I'm really encouraged, coming out of our work session, the way we're defining how we want to get information and what type of information we're getting. Administration's working to get us there. I know this month was a little bit challenging for some of you, but getting as much of that before the meeting as possible to allow us to prep. is gonna be pretty important, and I guess I'd challenge us as board members to dedicate the time to do that prep. If they're gonna get us that information early, let's get that prep done and, you know, have good, active discussions while we're here, which is a lot of what we talked about, during our work session, so. Appreciate everybody's efforts in that, because I think we're taking a step up as a board, and I'm excited about what we can do, so. Sorry for grandstanding, I just really needed to say that.
Sometimes it's worth grandstanding.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, if there's nothing else, I'd need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.